welcome our colleagues who have joined us tonight for the history of Black lawyers in California. Thank you, Charles Houston Bar Association President Terrence Evans, for putting this together, and all of our esteemed speakers and colleagues. Cable, I'm president of the California Association of Black Lawyers, and it's been a busy and successful year. We have at least 10 candidates that we have recommended to Governor Newsom through our Judicial Evaluations Committee. And we actually have a very close relationship now with Judicial Appointment Secretary Cespedes, who actually called us to let us know about the appointment for Justice Guerrero to the Supreme Court last Thursday. We've significantly increased our support to the California Legislative Black Caucus through Assemblyman Gibson and Senator Bradford. And we helped pass legislation addressing police positional asphyxiation, not easy to say, police no chokehold, and police decertification legislation. Through our Ryan Harrison, one of our members, we were asked to testify before 4 subcommittees. And along with ALSA, Stanford University, we co-sponsored the successful hepatitis screening and linkage to care bill, which became law recently. Now we're sponsoring the ban on ghost guns. And that legislation should be coming through shortly, and we will be a sponsor or a co-sponsor. We're working with the California Bar Association, and members of the Cable Board are members of several ad hoc committees, such as the Attorney Discipline Committee, the Council on Access and Fairness, and the Blue Ribbon Commission on the future of the bar exam. We've scheduled a legislative day in Sacramento for April 24th and 25th, and we are hosting our first Cable in-person conference in the last 3 years, which will be June 23rd through the 26th. We have a very successful board. We meet monthly instead of quarterly now. And would you like to be involved in Cable activities? Please send us a message at cableassociation@gmail.com. And thank you for your support of Cable. I'll now introduce Tamara Benefield-Falk, who is National Bar Association Region 9 representative.
Thank you. Thank you, Cable. Welcome, family, friends, and colleagues. My name is Tamara Benefield-Falk. I am a family law trial advocate, and I have the pleasure of serving as the Region 9 Director of the National Bar Association, along with our board, the Honorable Tara Newman, Amy Depew, Chloe Woods, Yuri Walker, Terry Wiley, and our very own Terrence Evans, Deputy Region 9 Director. Thank you so much, Terrence, for your outstanding contributions to Black history in the making. And you are the reason why we can all enjoy this program today. And we will be inviting so many more of you to join a Southern California Leadership Roundtable next month. Well, let me take a point of personal privilege to invite you to join the National Bar Association. It is the oldest and largest predominantly African-American network of attorneys and judges. The NBA represents the interests of 66,000 lawyers, judges, law professors, and students. Please visit nationalbar.org for more information on how you can join the movement. Our president is the distinguished and honorable Carlos Moore, and he is running a nationwide campaign calling for us to stand up for justice, for freedom, and for equality. And he is advocating for us all over the place, from CNN to the White House. And this weekend, he will be hosting a town hall. So please join and don't miss out. This summer, the NBA will be hosting its annual convention in person in Memphis, Tennessee, where you can see all of our kings and queens, like Black America's Attorney General, Benjamin Crump, and heavy hitters like Chris Stewart and Lee Merritt, and incoming President Lanita Baker, attorney for the family of Breonna Taylor. Yes, say her name, Breonna Taylor. They will be there to educate, uplift, and motivate you to be the best attorney, advocate, and social engineer that you can be. And why is this so important? Well, I like to think of it this way. All of the struggles and progress we have made as a people has amounted to you right now, And we are the living epistles of a wondrous and glorious people. Happy Black History Month from the National Bar Association.
Thank you so much, Tamara, and thank you so much, everybody, for joining us and being part of this Black History Month program. We're so excited to have such a distinguished panel, all of them past presidents of various Black bar associations, all of them past presidents of the Charles Houston Bar Association, 3 co-founders of CABLE, which is the umbrella organization for all Black bar associations and judicial organizations in California. And we have at least 2 past presidents of the National Bar Association, which of course is the largest Black bar association in the world and the umbrella bar association for all Black bar associations. I want to take a moment, if I may, to thank our generous sponsors that have helped to make this program possible. I want to thank my firm, Duane Morris LLP, for hosting this event on its platform. We appreciate all the great work that you do on diversity and inclusion. We, of course, want to thank Charles Houston Bar Association for organizing and supporting this program. We want to thank Region 9 of the National Bar Association, the Alameda County Bar Association, the Contra Costa Bar Association, Bay Area Lawyers of Individual Freedom, the Bar Association of San Francisco, California Lawyers Association, CLA Racial Justice Committee, the Women's Lawyers Association of Los Angeles, Black Women Lawyers of Los Angeles, Black Women Lawyers of Northern California, the Minority Bar Coalition, the John Langston Bar Association, the Richard T. Fields Bar Association, the Wiley Manuel Bar Association, the American Bar Association, the Bernard Jefferson Bar Association, the Hugh Goodwin Bar Association, Santa Clara Black Lawyers Association, and the California Association of Black Lawyers. I think this might be among the largest number of sponsors that we've had for an event. So thank you so much. We appreciate it. My name is Terrence Evans. I'm a partner at Duane Morris, where I'm also the co-chair of our banking and financial services practice and the co-leader of our diversity and inclusion program in San Francisco. I have the honor of wearing a few hats outside of the firm. I am the president of Charles Houston Bar Association, also deputy director of Region 9 of the National Bar Association, and I'm also on the board of the California Lawyers Association. Joining me as my co-moderator here is the amazing Amira Hampton, who helped to organize this program and put it together. So Amira, this wouldn't have happened without you. Amira is a Solano County public defender. In addition to that, she is the legal services chair for the Charles Houston Bar Association and has worked extraordinarily hard in the legal community to promote diversity, inclusion, and equity. Before we get into the introductions of the panel, I want to share my screen for just a minute. And when I do these programs, I just like to remind people how fortunate we are to be having this conversation. So over the past 2 years, I've had the honor of speaking at about 80 diversity and inclusion programs. And beginning in May of last year, I started to track states that were enacting bans on what some folks have termed critical race theory. So in May 13, 2021, 14 states had enacted laws that restrict discussions that we will be having today about Black history and the contributions of people of color. In June of 2021, so this was right around Juneteenth when I started giving presentations, we were up to 21 states banned the very discussion that we're going to be having this evening. If you are a public school teacher in these states, you can be fired, you can have your pay cut. If you're working at a public university in these states, you can have tenure denied. In October of 2021, this is when we did our 9th annual citywide diversity and inclusion program with the Bar Association of San Francisco. We were up to 28 states where the conversation that we'll be having today is banned by law in public schools. And if we look at today, right now there is legislation pending in 36 states, that would ban the very discussion that we're having today about the important contributions of Black lawyers and Black bar associations. So very sobering, and it also highlights the importance of the discussion that we're having. I'm going to pass the mic to my good friend and co-moderator, Myra, who will begin introductions of our panel.
Thank you, Mr. Evans. Known for protecting the constitutional rights of the Bay Area's poorest residents, Mr. Quazan Malouf is a trailblazer in the criminal defense community and beyond. Mr. Malouf is a longstanding member of the San Francisco Public Defender Office, having held many leadership positions within that office for the last 20 years. He has had an active role in many legal organizations, including past president of the Charles Houston Bar Association, board member of the National Bar Association, and past president of the California Association of Black Lawyers. Mr. Malouf has received many awards, including Minority Bar Coalition Unity Award for his outstanding service to the community, Northern California Top Attorney Award, and in 2014, Mr. Malouf received the Gideon Award from the Santa Clara County Black Lawyers Association, an honor received for his outstanding public service in the area of criminal defense. Mr. Malouf, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
It is almost impossible to adequately articulate everything Ms. Johnson has accomplished thus far, as her accolades could fill an entire book. She now serves as senior advisor to Attorney General Rob Bonta, where she oversees the Division of Legal Affairs, Law Enforcement, Operations, Policy, and Technology. Prior to this position, she served as a Chief Assistant District Attorney in Contra Costa County. She has also served as an associate attorney to the former Attorney General, now Vice President, Ms. Kamala Harris. Ms. Johnson is a former president of Charles Houston Bar Association and is clearly a powerhouse in her own right. I'm personally honored to have her here today. Thank you, Ms. Johnson. Mr. George Holland is a living legend. Mr. Holland has a wide breadth of experience across the legal system. A former probation officer and prior public defender, Mr. Holland has practiced in both areas of civil and criminal litigation. An attorney for 49 years and counting, he's the current president of the Oakland branch of the NAACP. Mr. Holland was a founding member and past president of Cable, and was also the past president of the Charles Houston Bar Association and the Wiley Manning Law Foundation. Please help me welcome living legend George Holland Sr.
Thank you, Amar. Thank you.
A man who needs no introduction, but he will get one tonight, is Mr. Robert L. Harris. Mr. Harris' civil rights activism and participation in the political process and the legal community goes back roughly 5 decades. He has dedicated himself to change the face of the legal community. Mr. Harris spent much of his legal career at PG&E, retiring as vice president. During his time with the company, he was the first and only lawyer in PG&E's history to argue and win cases in the United States Supreme Court. As a founding member of Cable, Mr. Harris called the first session of this historic organization to order on April 23rd, 1977. Mr. Harris continued his pattern of leadership by becoming president of Cable and Charles Houston Bar Association. Mr. Harris received the highest honor from Cable, the Lauren Miller Award, and its Lifetime Achievement Award. In 2013, he was inducted into the National Bar Association Hall of Fame, and shortly after, in 2016, he was inducted into Cable Hall of Fame. Mr. Harris, welcome.
Thank you very much.
And Mr. Evans, I will turn it over to you to introduce the remaining panel.
Thank you so much. And I failed to mention earlier that for those of you who would like to receive elimination of bias MCLE credit, during this program, there will be a series of poll questions that are making sure that you're paying attention. Please respond to each of those poll questions that you see on your screen, and you will be able to receive elimination of bias MCLE credit. So I have the great honor of introducing several of our past presidents, and I will begin with the great John Burris, who of course is one of the foremost civil rights lawyers in American history. He has represented many high-profile clients, including Rodney King, where he won a $3.8 million suit against the LAPD. He is a past president of the Charles Houston Bar Association. He's a co-founder and past president of the California Association of Black Lawyers, a past president of the National Bar Association. He's won tens of millions of dollars in representing people in civil rights matters. And he was featured in a movie about Oscar Grant, whose family he also represented. John, thanks so much here and being part of this. We have with us past president, Kimberly Evans. She is a former partner in the San Francisco office of Louis Brisbois. She recently joined AAA of Northern California. She is a past president of the Charles Houston Bar Association. She has served as a member of the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights, and she has sat on the Board of Governors for the University of San Francisco Law School. She was also Region 9 Director for the National Bar Association, and she also was a member of the California Association of Black Lawyers. Kimberly, thank you so much for being with us today. I next have the honor of introducing past president Nedra Schaller. Nedra is a past president of the Charles Houston Bar Association. She has served as deputy county counsel in the Office of County Counsel. She has been extremely involved in civil rights and diversity and inclusion work with the Alameda County Bar Association, the California Association of Black Lawyers, and also the National Bar Association. Nedra, we're so happy to have you here with us tonight. I next have the honor of welcoming past president Rosinia Cummings. Rosinia is a native of Berkeley. She is a past president of the Charles Houston Bar Association, a past president of the California Association of Black Lawyers. She served as vice president of the National Bar Association and co-chair of the NBA's election task force. She has been involved in civil rights work and diversity and inclusion work for much of her career. She's also a proud member of the Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. Rosinia, we're so extremely happy to have you here with us this evening. Thanks again to our amazing panel. Before we get into a discussion with the panel regarding some very important issues, past and present, we're going to have a conversation about Black history. Last year when we did this panel, or did this program, we had the amazing Judge Charles Smiley, who provided a synopsis of some important Black history events. And we're going to cover just some of those events so that we can then jump into our discussion and we can have some context for what gave rise to the creation of Black bar associations. I'm going to share my screen again, and I'm going to show you all a little bit of information about what Black lawyers were dealing with at the time that the National Bar Association was created and many of the California bars. So many folks are not aware of this, but the reason why we have Black bar associations, Asian bar associations, Latinx Hispanic bar associations, Native American bar associations, and LGBTQ bar associations is because the American Bar Association and many local bar associations refuse to admit non-whites. And so it was necessary for people of color and people of diverse backgrounds to, amongst themselves, organize so that they would have a place to practice and to discuss matters to promote their opportunities in the profession. And I want to also create some context about what was going on in California around the time that these bar associations were created. Many people, when they think about segregation, when they think about Jim Crow laws, they think that this is something that only happened in the South. But actually here in the great state of California, for a 100-year period, and even after that, until we had the passage of the Civil Rights Act, We had laws in California that barred non-whites from having access to most hospitals. So if you were a Black person and you were in an emergency situation and needed medical treatment, you could not just go to any hospital. You could only go to a hospital that treated non-whites. If you were not white in the state of California, and this was true in much of the rest of the country, you were barred from testifying in any case where a white person was a party. And it didn't matter if it was a criminal case, it didn't matter if it was a civil case, you could not speak out against anyone who happened to be white. So you can imagine yourself if you're in some kind of vehicle accident, if you were in some kind of situation where you witnessed a crime, you would not be able to testify. Non-whites in California were barred from serving on juries. Non-whites in California were barred from voting. Non-whites in California were barred from holding elective office. Non-whites in California, and again, this was true in much of the world, much of the country, were barred from serving as judges. We're going to get into some of the history regarding the first male and female judges in California. Non-white attorneys were barred from questioning white witnesses. So you look at this panel, you look at all of these beautiful Black faces. If we had been trying to practice law during this particular time in California history, we would not be able to question white witnesses. You can imagine how difficult it would be to litigate if you were barred from questioning people who happen to be white. Non-whites were barred from public schools in California, were barred from buying and renting property. So this is where we have redlining and limitations on where people of color could live. Folks wonder, why do we have Black neighborhoods and Latinx neighborhoods and Asian neighborhoods and other types of neighborhoods? Well, it wasn't because people simply just wanted to be together. They were prohibited from living in certain areas. The discrimination even continued into death, where non-whites were barred from being buried in certain cemeteries. It extended to restaurants. It extended to hotels and theaters and pools and beaches. So basically every area of public life, non-whites were barred from participating. Again, non-whites were denied admission to bar associations. So you will hear from some of these great leaders that are here to speak. We're barred from the state bar associations. We're barred from the city bar associations, the county bar associations, the American bar associations. Everywhere you turn, non-whites were denied an opportunity to be part of the legal community, so they had to build their own communities. Denied public transportation, denied equal pay for equal work. So you can have the same job, you can work just as hard, but there were no laws that required Black people to be paid the same as white people. And of course, we are familiar with the laws that prohibited racial mixing. I want to talk about also some of the other issues that impacted the Black community during this particular time that these bar associations were created. So many folks are not familiar with the Homestead Act. The Homestead Act was one of the greatest generators of wealth in the United States. Hundreds of millions of acres of land were given out. The program was enacted just as slavery was ending, and African Americans were prohibited from participating in the program. About 90% of all of the land that was given out by the American government was given to white people, many of them immigrants from Europe who immigrated to the United States specifically to take advantage of the program. So if we just think for a minute, we can imagine how different life would have been for former slaves if they had been allowed to get their 160 acres of public land, as were many white folks during that particular time. Another important piece of history that folks were dealing with around the time that these bar associations were created was following World War II. You had 1.2 million Black servicemen and Black servicewomen who had put their lives on the line to protect democracy, to protect our great country. And so the United States Congress, they passed the GI Bill, in order to help veterans get resettled back into American life, but Black veterans were specifically denied the opportunity to participate in this program. The GI Bill provided money for college, money to buy a home, money to start a business, money to help your kids go to school. All of this denied to the 1.2 million Black servicemen and women. So you imagine if we could go back in time and if we could give this benefit to those 1.2 million veterans, how different life might have been for many members of the Black community. We can also look at Social Security, which many people refer to as a safety net. Well, when Social Security was passed, it was administered at the local level, and it was done in such a way that 70% of Black Americans were denied Social Security benefits. These are benefits that they paid for with their tax dollars. They were denied the opportunity to take advantage of it. We already talked about redlining. Another important thing to be aware of is that in addition to all of the Jim Crow laws that existed at the time that these bar associations were created, there were also more than 30 massacres. Some of them have been featured in movies, but there were 30 massacres that completely decimated 30 plus African American neighborhoods. These were neighborhoods where, despite all of the discrimination, Black people had managed to start their own law firms, their own hospitals, their own hotels. They had homes, they had lives, they had churches. And in more than 30 instances in the great United States of America, all of these neighborhoods were completely burned down to the ground. And to add insult to injury, the individuals who burned down these neighborhoods took the property for themselves and built their own towns. So not only did they not get to rebuild on the land that they owned, it was taken away from them. And as I already said, it wasn't like they could just go to court and sue. They were specifically denied the opportunity to have their voices heard in our court system. I'm going to take us through a little bit of the history. I'll stop sharing my screen for just a second. I'm going to take us through a little bit of the history of the Black Bar Associations, and then we're going to get into our panel discussion. So as I mentioned, there were many people of color who wanted to get together and be part of something where they could have conversations and learn from each other in ways that they could improve their careers, but that opportunity was denied to them by the majority white bar associations. And so we had a number of leaders that got together and started their own organizations. And I just want to feature some of these leaders and some of these bar associations. I'm going to share my screen again, and then we'll get into our discussion. So right here, we have Charles Houston, the namesake of the Charles Houston Bar Association. He is referred to as the father of the civil rights movement, the father of desegregation. He helped to create the blueprint that made it possible for other civil rights leaders like Thurgood Marshall and others to follow him. He created the blueprint for the Brown versus Board of Education decision and many other desegregation cases. These are some pictures of Charles Houston. Here's some pictures of Charles Houston as a child with his parents. He served as a general counsel for the NAACP. He went on to be a dean at Howard Law School. Here on the right, you have a picture of Charles Houston with his Harvard class. This was in 1919. He was the first Black editor of the Harvard Law Review. On the left, you have a picture of Charles Houston as an Army officer during World War I. And there was a quote of his as he was leaving the service, and the quote is, "The hate and scorn showered on us Negro officers by our fellow Americans convinced me that there was no sense in my dying for a world ruled by them. I made up my mind that if I got through this war, I would study law and use my time fighting for men who could not strike back." Here's another picture showing Charles Houston on the right with Thurgood Marshall on the far left standing up. Thurgood Marshall, of course, went on to become the first justice, Black justice on the United States Supreme Court. We have a bit of history, and I'm going to encourage everybody to look at the written materials. I prepared written materials with a lot of deep historical information for this presentation. We won't have time to go through all the details. I wrote about 70 pages. It took me several months to put this information together, but it has helpful information that will supplement what we discussed during this program. But Charles Houston Bar Association has roots that go back to 1910, and it became an official association in 1955. There's a lot more detail in here that you can get from the written, show just the leaders who were involved. We have three of the co-founders of CABLE. As I mentioned, it is the umbrella organization for all Black bar associations and judicial organizations in California. Here we have Bob Harris, John Burris, George Holland, three of the co-founders of CABLE, and they'll talk to you about their experience and why they thought that was necessary. These are pictures of John M. Langston. The Langston Bar Association is the Black Bar Association affiliate in Los Angeles. The namesake is John M. Langston. He was, I believe, the first Black congressman. And these are pictures of him during the time that he was in Congress. We have a lot of information about his background and his history and his important contributions. These here, this is a picture of Wiley Manuel. Justice Manuel was the first Black justice on the California Supreme Court. He is the namesake of the Wiley Manuel Bar Association of Sacramento County. Interesting detail, as I was putting this together, I went to the various websites of the Black affiliate bar associations. They failed to mention that he's also a past president of the Charles Houston Bar Association. And when he was appointed at the same time as Rose Bird. And there's a lot of interesting historical information about his service and his important contributions to the experience of Black lawyers in California. We also have, and this is included in the written materials, the Black Women Lawyers Association of Northern California. These are pictures of two of the co-founders, the Honorable Patricia Ann Kelly, the Honorable Judith Ford. And this was an organization of African-American women lawyers and judges who came together focusing specifically on how to empower and strengthen Black women in the legal profession. We also have the equivalent down in Los Angeles, California, the Black Women Lawyers Association of Los Angeles, fighting to increase the representation and opportunities for Black women in LA. One interesting personal fact, the Black Women Lawyers Association of LA, they give out an annual scholarship to help young people who need assistance in taking the bar exam and preparing. Well, I won't say how many years ago, it was almost 20 years ago, I became the first Black man in history to win their annual bar scholarship. I looked it up. I needed money to get ready for the bar exam. I didn't see where there was a limitation on being a man or a woman. I applied, and thank God for those amazing women. I got the scholarship, and here I am today. We also have Richard T. Fields Bar Association in Riverside County, honoring Justice Richard T. Fields and all of his amazing work and contributions to the legal community. Just a few more historical facts, and again, I go into excruciating detail, 70 pages in the written materials. We have here a picture of Annie Virginia Steffens Cocker. She is the first Black woman to pass the California bar exam, and that was in 1939. She joined the California State Office of the Legislature, and throughout her career, she worked to help pass bills that were focused on civil rights and making life better for people of color. On the right, we have a picture of Robert Charles O'Hara. He was the first Black man to pass the California bar exam in 1884. On the left is a picture of Mr. O'Hara Benjamin with his family. You can see him there with his wife, 2 children, and father-in-law. It was a sad ending to Mr. O'Hara. There was a lot of consternation about this Black man being newly admitted to the bar, and he was murdered doing his best trying to fight for civil rights. He became a martyr. Just a couple of more historical details before we jump into our discussion. And again, I encourage people to look at the written materials because there's just so much rich history here that I'd love for folks to see. We have on the left, Edwin L. Jefferson. He was the first Black man to be a judge west of the Mississippi and also the first Black man who was a judge in California. Moved to Los Angeles in 1921, started as a campus janitor and then graduated from USC Law School in 1931. He was appointed to the LA Municipal Court in 1941 and then Los Angeles Superior Court in 1949. Later in 1961, he was appointed to the state Second District Court of Appeal, and he remained the only Black appellate justice in the entire state of California until his retirement. On the right, we have the amazing Vino Spencer. She was the first Black woman judge in California. She was also one of the longest serving judges. She served on the bench for 46 years, passed away at the age of 96. I wish I could go into more history. There's so much rich history, so many amazing history makers, but we want to get into the discussion with this incredible rock star panel. So I will now pass the microphone to my amazing co-moderator, Amira, who will ask the first question to the panel.
Thank you, Mr. Evans. So here's the first question. We know that the Charles Houston Bar Association is the oldest Black bar association in California, dating back to 1955. We also know that CABLE was created in 1976, with its first meeting being held on April 23rd, 1977. To the founders of this organization, why was this statewide organization created? What did you hope to accomplish with such organization? And I'll start with Mr. Burris.
John, you're on mute.
It was, thank you. It was a pleasure listening to all of the history. I thought I knew a lot of history, but I must tell you that I felt kind of ignorant listening to all the information that you gathered. Well, let me tell you, when the CABLE was organized in our first meeting, I had been in California for several months. I had just come from Chicago. I'd been involved with the Cook County Bar Association there and just started being involved with Charles Houston. But CABLE in its formation really started out, my way of thinking, was a networking activity. It was an opportunity for the Southern California lawyers and Northern California lawyers to get together. I don't know at the time of our first meeting and gathering whether there was a plan for a national or statewide organization. That kind of developed after we were there for 1 or 2 days, and we started having these really good sessions about some of the contemporary issues that were going, particularly Bakke and some of the prominent lawyers and judges and political leaders of that period of time all came out. And so there was this high energy that was being emanated from all of us. And from that, it grew to this point where we thought that this kind of energy, this kind of gathering really should have staying power. And that staying power should be in an association that allows for us to have a major voice, if you will, throughout the state. And at that time, there was a lot of issues around politics. Jerry Brown, I think, was the governor or about to become the governor. And there was issues around the legislative agendas that was being put forth, some of the very controversial issues that were there. Willie Brown was a major political person at the time. And it was really viewed that we should have an association that in many ways can have major impact on the judiciary, on the legislative branch, and to be a force even within the state bar itself. And so from that came this organization. I was one of the first treasurers. I was the first treasurer, and within a couple of years, I became a president. But I think that the foundation of it came about from this sense with all these African-American lawyers who were in different parts of the state, that as one body speaking collectively, we could have significant influence, not only in the judiciary, but the legislative, but also from a networking point of view, because then we were starting to have lawyers who had practices that were both in Southern California and Northern California. And this really presented an opportunity to have co-counsels, to have local counsels for people who are working in different jurisdictions. So from that point of view, it was hugely successful. And I think from my sense, and going and being a member, that what we were projecting out is future influence, future power, future ability to select and have a meaningful impact upon the judiciary. And that was, seems to me, the foundational component of what we wanted to do. And when we left there, it was high energy after that first session. And there was a commitment on our part of all of us to go forward and to work collectively in a unified way to improve the plight and an understanding, appreciation, and the stature of African-American lawyers. And that, to me, was the true underpinnings of why the association was formulated and what we thought as an idea going forward. And I was happy to participate as a president early and leadership positions, and participated in many various seminars that we've had down through the years. So for me, it's been a very important organization.
Thank you, Mr. Burris. Now to Mr. Harris.
The founding of CABLE was really rooted in the National Bar Association. In 1976, after the convention in Houston, Texas, two people became critical to the founding of the CABLE. They were Judge Ben Travis of Oakland and Judge David Cunningham. They were obsessed with the notion that we should have a statewide organization so that we could have more influence. I point all of this out in my book, Goodbye Arkadelphia, in terms of the founding of CABLE. And I think it's a story that would be of interest to you. As John indicated, the networking possibilities for Californian lawyers was enormous. And it was out of those two men, Judge Ben Travis, representing the Charles Houston Bar Association, and David Cunningham, representing the Langston Bar Association, that we figured out a way to bring the whole state together. And as a result, CABLE was founded. And as John pointed out, we left Los Angeles in 1977, April 23rd, with high energy. Let me stop there. But again, I really do think it would be important to read my book, Goodbye Arkadelphia, which explains some of this.
Thank you, Mr. Now, Mr. Holland, what are your thoughts?
As being one of the founders, I think it's very, very important to talk about the political climate that existed at that time. We as Black people have been having difficulties in all these different arenas well before 1976, when the California Association of Black Lawyers was founded. I think what happens is that, or what happened at that time, is that we had a series of defeats. We were struggling, and those of us who came out of law school about the time that I came out, we couldn't find jobs for the most part, and we had to go and find start our own practices and try to make it on our own, which is okay. And that's that kind of atmosphere that existed that made us closer and closer together as lawyers. And probably the single most person or the single person that should get the most credit is Benjamin Travis. Benjamin was the founder of he was a person to reactivate the Charles Houston Law Club and made it to be the Charles Houston Bar Association, excuse me. Ben was also the catalyst that gave rise to the Wiley Emanuel Law Foundation. And he is the person that got many of us involved in law, because I knew Mr. Ben Travis before he was a lawyer. And he was always a person that was trying to keep you aware of the kinds of social occurrences and political occurrences that were happening at that time that we had to pay attention to. We had a series of meetings to form the California Association of Black Lawyers, and a couple other people who were also instrumental, like Jimmy Reese from Los Angeles, Robert Robertson from Los Angeles, and I think Stan Malone also from Los Angeles. These men also were responsible for the creation of the California Association of Black Lawyers. And you got to keep in mind too that one of the things that stands out in my mind is how Don McCullum became the first president of the California Association of Black Lawyers. Don, as some of us who know him, was a very, very smart man. He was a perennial head of the Oakland branch of the NAACP. But at the first convention that we had in Los Angeles, Don McCullum seemed to have been the only person to bring a curriculum vitae. He was the only one that had a resume. Nobody else had one. So we put these resumes on everybody's door in the hotel that we're in Los Angeles. And you know guess who became the first president? Don McCullum. So it's just an indication or a reminder of there were very innovative persons at that time. And Bob and John have told you about some of the things that are more concrete, but those are the kind of things that stand out in my mind. It was a need to get together with Southern California, Northern California lawyers. And I created many, many friendships by that bonding of those two areas of California. And I'll always be appreciative of that and the people I've made, the good people I've made, some of whom are not here today, but we just had some wonderful relationships that we created. So thank you for allowing me this opportunity to speak about the formation of the California Association of Black Lawyers.
Thank you, Mr. Holland. Now that we've heard from the three founders, I want to turn it to Mr. Maloof as a past president. What is your take on CABLE and its formation and what it went to accomplish?
Yeah, well, thank you for asking me. I'm going to read a quote directly from the bylaws of CABLE's bylaws. And it says, the primary motivating factor for the organization's formation was to change the face of the judiciary in California and to influence the course of events pertinent to Black people. I think CABLE has made tremendous strides in the legal community. However, we must not be afraid to change the status quo. Changing the status quo doesn't mean sitting around and waiting for the governor to appoint a Black attorney as a judge, but it means changing the status quo, getting our lawyers to actually run for office and training our lawyers how to run for office. There's another quote I'm going to read, and this is also from CABLE's bylaws. First thing I want to say is we hear a lot that the number of Black lawyers in California is dismal. That's what we hear all the time. It's dismal. And again, if we want to change the face, we need to actively go out there and do that. But this one quote I want to read, and it says, this is actually part of CABLE's objectives. This was also in the bylaws, is to seek out and eradicate the roots and causes of racism. Now, with this previous president that we've had, I won't mention his name, but we all know who I'm talking about. He has emboldened people to be overtly racist. So as far as CABLE is seeking out and eradicating the roots and causes of racism, we still have a long way to go in California and a long way to go in the United States. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Maloof. I think that sums it up. I'll turn it over to Mr. Evans for question number 2.
Thank you so much, Amira. And this question is directed to our amazing Black women on the panel. Black women have been and continue to be the backbone of the civil rights movement. From the inception of our country, Black women have battled both racism and gender discrimination. This discrimination against Black women has also manifested itself in the legal profession, where Black women are less likely than any other demographic to be promoted to positions of power in law firms or legal departments. All of you have defied the odds and achieved excellence in your professional careers. Based on your life experience, please tell us the greatest challenge facing Black women in the legal profession. And we can, we'll start this off with Venus.
Thank you. You know, in thinking about women and certainly Black women, and, you know, in thinking about where I think the future is, I often hark back to certainly Black women being the foundation and the cornerstone of the voting rights movement. Many people don't talk about the history of Black women when it comes to voting rights in the United States. Certainly think about Black women as the backbone and the cornerstone, certainly of the civil rights movement as well. Us going to law school, us certainly trying to break barriers, and we're still having to break barriers, certainly as many of us on this panel are in the rooms that we sit in and the work that we do. But I certainly think that representation matters. It's certainly important for us to continue to mentor and uplift. I've been mentored by every Black woman sitting on this panel today. I am thankful for Nidra. I am thankful for Kimmy. I am thankful for Rosinia, who all came before me. My ability to join Charles Houston certainly and become a board member, that was under Nidra. She began grooming me to certainly take an honored place in being the president of Charles Houston Bar Association. It certainly is an important part of, I think, all of our legal work and our representation in rooms and in the work that we do. And so I continue to be amazed. I continue to sit in awe of Black women and the work that we do. And I'm certainly just thankful for the Black women that are part of my life and who are in the Bar Association.
And since you mentioned the great Nidra Schaller, Nidra, we would love your thoughts on this topic.
Thank you, Terrence. So I believe that there are many challenges that we continue to face in our profession. I do believe that we are undervalued. I believe that we are underestimated. I believe that we are underutilized. I believe that, you know, we can sometimes be viewed as aggressive when our white counterparts are just being seen as concise and to the point. We continue to be mistaken as law clerks, as court reporters, as clients. I will say that in my years of practice, I practiced in a very casual courtroom, but I never once came into my courtroom casually. I took my profession, I took this responsibility very seriously, whereas my white counterparts most days came in unprepared and came in looking very unprofessional. But as soon as I hit that courthouse door, I was ready, I was prepared. I wanted to perform my very best. And I did that because the challenge that I see that we continue to face is that although we are competent, although we are above reproach, or although we are excellent practitioners, we are not always seen that way. We are not always valued in that way. And so this collective group ensures that we have a voice, ensures that we have a colleague to talk to, ensures that we have mentors to toss these ideas and concerns around with, ensures that these challenges that we have to deal with on the day-to-day do not wear us down, but instead lift us up. So those are the challenges that I see.
Thank you so much, Nidra. Rosinia.
Thank you. Good evening. So kind of going on what Nidra said, I'm like, I don't know if we necessarily get discriminated against directly. There's always subtle discrimination within your job. You don't know why you didn't get the promotion, or you're wondering why somebody has a mentor and you don't. What I think we really face, when as she really said, is the backlash of the long held assumption that we are aggressive and we're angry women. And so I have a prime example. I was having I could say heated discussion with another colleague at work at one point, and we were disagreeing. We didn't agree on the format and where we needed to go forward. But all of a sudden he pulls out of his, as I call it, his bellywick of, why am I so hostile? And I'm sitting in there and I'm just like, I'm discussing my point the same way you're discussing your point. And now all of a sudden in the room, it becomes the Black woman is angry and she's hostile. So I was literally, I was young in my career. I was taken aback. I was just voicing my opinion, but all of a sudden I was put in this box. So his comment hit the mark. All of a sudden I didn't want to talk anymore. I didn't want to speak my conversation. I tempered my conversation. And he basically won the discussion because I didn't want to feel like in the room, I'm hostile and I'm angry. So I didn't take it, I didn't let it frustrate me. I took it as a learning opportunity. So I've learned, unfortunately, to have to speak a certain way at work so I can basically be heard. I must be softer and gentler to bring my point. I can no longer bring my full self to work because my counterparts will dismiss my opinion. So I've learned to be able to speak a certain way and be a certain way so I won't be perceived as this angry, hostile Black woman. But fortunately, as I say, and I'm never conceived hostile and maybe aggressive, maybe I'm a leader, I found the Bar Association, which caters to African-American people. And I'm forever grateful that that is a safe space for me to be all that I can be and be the African-American leader woman that I want to be and argue my opinion and not be considered hostile, but considered some person who has value and that I can bring it to the table.
Thank you so much, Rosinia. Kimberly, may we hear from you on this topic as well?
All of these wonderful ladies pretty much touched on all the challenges that we face as Black women. I think I'm the only one that worked in law firms out of the ones that I've spoken. So I've worked, I'm now in-house, but I worked for about 20 years in majority law firms, usually the only Black attorney, not just female, but Black attorney. At least my first firm, I was the only Black attorney for the 3.5 years I was there. At the firm I just left, I was maybe one of 5, and then I was the only Black partner in the San Francisco office for many, many years. Starting out, I would say that was probably my biggest challenge. I'm not, I mean, I grew up pretty much being the only, a lot of situations I was in at school, especially in elementary, but when you're first starting out as a lawyer, because you don't really learn how to be a lawyer in law school, you're taught fundamentals, but you're not really taught how to be a lawyer. And I was fortunate enough to, both law firms I worked at, I was thrown into the fire. So I was doing depositions, going to court early on. I wasn't just stuck in a room doing research. And so you kind of have that, you want to do it, but you can't just be good, you know, not just as a Black woman, but, you know, Black period. You can't just be good. You have to be exceptional to be noticed. And that's a lot of stress on you. And I think for me, you know, I struggled early on because, you know, just not being the only Black person, you know, bring your true self, as Rosinia said, or your full self to work. You got to learn to walk that fine line of, you know, you want to be assertive, but sometimes you're not because you don't want to be termed the angry Black woman. And so that to me, even through being partner, I mean, of course, I got more comfortable in my role, but it was a long road for me, being comfortable and being able to speak how I wanted to speak, be, you know, aggressive. Sometimes you have to be aggressive, Because not only in the firms, but for me, even in the courtroom or in cases, a lot of time, most of the times I was the only Black. I mean, it was rare. I mean, I'd have to keep the smile to myself when I walk in and see opposing counsel with another Black person, or walk into court and see the judge is Black. And most of the time it's a judge I know because they're in Charles Houston or cable. We kind of do that little, hey, how you doing type thing. But yeah, that's probably the biggest challenge I had, was just being the only in the room.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And before we go on, I can see, Eileen, I could just see something in your eyes that you wanted to say something on this topic. I could feel it. Eileen, would you like to share your thoughts on this?
Just quickly, I started my career, I'm going to age myself, over 32 years ago. I was 28 years old, and I was head counsel for a division of Lockheed Martin. And I never saw a person that looked like me, ever, in any situation that I was in. And I was giving advice to vice presidents of, the research and development division of a Fortune 50 company. And, oftentimes, not only were you holding on to that, don't get your temper in any close proximity to reality in a conversation, but, plan to be ignored. I mean, I remember several times where I would say, this is our position, and the next thing you know, something else would go out or something, and I would have to continually assert myself. And as Black women and as Black people in general, it is really hard to assert yourself and smile. I mean, this smile, my CEO tells me all the time, I know Eileen as well, because she can carry a smile longer than anybody I know, but you have that stereotype of the smiling, buffoon, of the Black person that, I'm going to smile. And so you have all these things going through your mind as you just are trying to get your job done. And it's surprising how I catch myself when my interest or my passion for something reaches my voice in a conversation and I have to tap it down. Or when I get ready to talk and everybody suddenly looks at their iPhone to send, everybody's talked in the room. It's my turn to give my presentation on legal or whatever. And my CEO immediately hits his phone and I'm thinking, I didn't even get the 2.6 seconds that everybody else got, So, the thing about this gathering of presidents and leaders in our community is also to tell you, keep going, keep trying, keep asserting yourself, continue to tap it down if you have to, continue to do whatever you need to do so that you are a successful attorney in your discipline, and don't feel at the end of the day that you were not true to yourself. Those are really two hard things to do at the same time, but we're all here. If you ever feel like that dichotomy between who you are and who you want to be and who the lawyer is in your environment that you're working in, call one of us, because we'll listen and then we'll tell you, the grass is greener over the septic tank. No matter where you go, you're going to encounter this. So you could stay and fix it, or you can go and go and go and, potentially, hopefully find that place. But in 32 years, I haven't.
Well, thank you for sharing those words with us. Very, very important. I'm going to pass the microphone to Amira, but before I do, I want to encourage people, if you have questions, please put them in the chat. We had a really good question. There was somebody who was asking, what did we mean when we were saying cable? It's shorthand for the California Association of Black Lawyers, but any questions, put them in there. I'm a really good multitasker. I'll try to answer those questions. Amira.
Thank you. The next question. Following the murder of George Floyd, there were anti-racism demonstrations seen across the world in 2020, and numerous frank and honest discussions about racial equality. However, no federal legislation to dismantle systematic racism was signed into law. The John Lewis Voting Rights Act and the George Floyd Policing Act both died in Congress. To make matters worse, 28 states have passed critical race theory laws that essentially ban the teaching of Black history in public schools. The question is, Where do we go from here? Is all hope lost? And I'll start with Mr. Malou.
Thank you. So the simple answer is no, not all hope is lost. It was about a year ago when public defenders across the country got together, and at exactly noon across the country, we're talking about hundreds of public defender offices, we got in front of the courthouse footsteps and we demonstrated, and we took 8 minutes of silence, honoring, I should say honoring, but acknowledging George Floyd's murder, because that's exactly what it was, a murder. It seems that every time we move 2 steps forward, someone is more than willing to take us 2 steps backwards. And hopefully we need to stay woke and know that we have a long way to go for equality and equal treatment in this country. So the question, where do we go from here? We need to continue to seek out allies. And remember, this is something that we have to remember. Slavery did not end through diplomacy. Slavery ended through war, through bloodshed. Mentally, we need to remember that in order to move forward, we are at war. And mentally, we need to be at war against racism. Those are my thoughts. So not all hope is lost. We just need to keep fighting.
Thank you, Mr. Malou. I remember that. We did that in Solano County as well. Our office participated in that 8 seconds. I'll turn it over to Mr. Burris. Mr. Burris, where do we go from here? Is all hope lost? Mr. Burris, you're on mute. You have to unmute yourself.
Well, I agree that all hope is not lost. I look at the continuum of where we are in life and recognizing that a long way has traveled since slavery, if you will, or before slavery. And that I see this as a continuum that I often refer to as a relay, and that we are really running our part, our leg of this relay. I have a specialized practice where I'm dealing with police brutality, police misconduct, and sometimes employment. And so I understand that there are real issues related to it. And when George Floyd issue went down, I basically wondered whether this was a moment or a movement. And in part, it has become somewhat of a movement, but it's still somewhat of a moment as well. And I say that because there's been a steady backlash against some of the protesting and good work that was being done. I will say this, around the country, notwithstanding the critical race theories, there's been a lot of efforts at reform in the police departments throughout this country. I will tell you that one of the major issues that we're dealing with, we've all heard about this, is qualified immunity that gives protection to police officers. A couple of states have essentially outlawed it and done away with qualified immunity, although the Supreme Court has not done so. I think that you have to be mindful of the fact that efforts along policing is very political. It becomes political in the sense you're talking about political leaders, you're talking about the police chief. I've had a number of departments where police chiefs have changed as a consequence of work that we've been involved in. There has been reform that has taken place. It can be done, but it's not something that's going to be done overnight. I don't see this ending in my own lifetime, and maybe not even some of yours, but progress can be made. So I don't think we should ever take a situation where all hope is lost, because our ancestors did not. They didn't take anything was lost. They found it, made something happen no matter what. And so it's up to us as well to continue to make something out of whatever we can and not be dissuaded because there are setbacks. There are going to be setbacks. I had a conversation yesterday with somewhere when we talked about it was 100 years from Dred Scott to the Board of Education, to Brown versus Board of Education. Think about what our African Americans had to endure during that 100 years. And now that we have another Supreme Court that's contrary, that's conservative, it may be another 150 or 100 years before it changes. That's why the Supreme Court appointment is important. So I don't believe in any way that hope is lost. You've got to be positive about these whole things and take the good when you can and make sure the negative do not overcome the positive. I can only tell you this, in 30 years since I did the Rodney King case and up until the time of George Floyd, there's been huge changes. And we're having convictions now that we've never had before. We have in prosecution the police officers we never had before. And for me, I'm getting significantly higher verdicts in cases because serious cities understand that what they're doing in police cannot stand. And the police, and so there are movements. Now, this is a limited area. I agree, because if you look at some of the employment things, you see that there's progress being made, but there's setbacks. The point of the matter is, hope is not lost. We have to keep forging ahead, one step at a time. Do not be dissuaded by the negativism, because there will always be that. White supremacists, all that stuff cannot stop you from moving forward, because at the end of the day, we owe it to our children and our grandchildren to provide a better road for them, even though the road can be tough, but it was tough for our fathers and grandfathers and great-grandfathers as well, and grandmothers. So stay focused, I say.
Thank you, Mr. Burris. We will continue to move forward. I'll turn it over to Mr. Evans for the next question.
Thank you so much. And I want to encourage the panelists, if you're looking at the chat, I've been trying to answer some questions, but there have been some questions directed at specific panelists. Feel free to chat it up and we'll get a copy of the chat as well, but feel free to chat with the attendees. There's some great questions there. Well, our next question takes us to the issue of discrimination against Black lawyers and Black judges. And I think some folks don't realize that Black people on a regular basis still today encounter discrimination. And the fact that we're lawyers and we're successful has not shielded us from discrimination, because when people see us, they see a Black face. And I have shared in different programs, discrimination I have faced while driving. I have been stopped while driving my car, police asking me how could I afford the car I was driving, where did I get the car from, assuming that I couldn't possibly afford to be driving that particular car. I have been arrested at the courthouse because the sheriff's deputies, this was in Sonoma County, thought that I was impersonating a lawyer and did not believe that I was a real lawyer. And Black lawyers on a regular basis encounter questions from folks where they ask if we're a real lawyer. I can't even tell you how many times I've been asked that. I've been practicing law almost 20 years, leadership in numerous bar associations, partner at a firm, and I hear it over and over again. Are you a real lawyer? Did you pass the bar exam? Did you really go to law school? And so my question for the panel, and we're going to begin with Mr. Maloof, is if you can provide us with one example where you were discriminated against as a lawyer.
Well, you know, it happens every day, and it happens so often, it's hard to keep track of it. But I'm going to tell you one little story. It's not exactly discriminating against me, but I'm going to tell you the story anyway. As we all know, I'm a San Francisco public defender, and San Francisco is one of the most progressive cities in the world. And I had a client, I don't remember her name. I say it again, I don't remember her name. I say it one more time. I don't remember her name. I said it 3 times because somebody's gonna say, he said his client's name. No, I don't remember her name, but it sounded something like Chantal Jackson. So when you hear the name Chantal Jackson, you can kind of picture maybe what her race is. Well, Chantal was charged with the crime of the century. She broke her boyfriend's flower pots. She was mad at him. And she's 26 years old. They charged her with felony vandalism. So I'm in the back, I'm talking to the judge, and I'm explaining, you know, she's a college student, she's 26, she's never been arrested before, and these are just, you know, a dime a dozen flower pots. It shouldn't be a felony. It should be a misdemeanor, and let the misdemeanor attorneys handle it. The judge looked at me and said, motion denied. Let's go out and call the case. So I go out and I step up to the podium and I call line 16, Chantal Jackson. And up came a bubbling, blue-eyed, blonde hair white woman. And the judge looked down on the calendar, and then he looked back up at me, and he looked at Chantal and said, Chantal? And she says, yes, that's me. And the judge turned to me and said, oh, Mr. Maloof, I see what you are talking about. I'm going to go ahead and reduce these charges to misdemeanors. So I say that story because, as we all know, Dr. Martin Luther King stated in his famous "I Have a Dream" speech that one day people will be judged by the content of their character and not the color of their skin. But even in San Francisco, the most progressive, or one of the most progressive cities in the world, you have judges judging people based on what they look like and not based on the content of their character. So that's my 2 cents. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Maloof. And we're going to ask Mr. Holland to also share some of his experience.
Thank you. I've been practicing about 49 years. So I've seen it for this period of time, starting in San Francisco, early on in my career. Anytime anything happened positively for you, then somebody must have done something inappropriate to give you that advantage. If a few Black judges that we had at that time, I couldn't appear in front of them because there was the belief that that person would be favorable to me because of my skin. So it traveled on up to 49 years for the most part that I can't really appear before Black judges because I know them. And so the inference is that I'm gonna get a favorable result, which of course is not true. But recently, not that recent, but within the last couple of years, one of my colleagues went to court for me on a case management conference. She appeared against an opponent from one of the large San Francisco law firms. This is in Alameda County. And so what happened was that there was a continuance date for a trial or some hearing. And the other lawyer said that he, or his partner who was not there either, would not be available on that date. So the judge said, pick another date. So another date was picked. So my colleague who was appearing for me said, Mr. Holland won't be available that day because he has a medical appointment. I want Mr. Holland to bring his medical records to me. So anyway, so my colleague, because she comes back to me and she says, tell me what the judge did. So I call the judge up and the judge says to the clerk, and when I asked to speak with her, that she can speak to me because other counsel wasn't on the phone. So I tried to call him and get him on the phone, but anyway, he didn't get on the phone. So what I did, I referred to the Council on Judicial Performance, or whatever council that you can complain on judges. I'm not sure of that, but I think that's what it was at that time. And of course, they had a hearing. They never called me, and I asked the clerk to give, to at that time to make a statement. I think we may have court reporters in the court at that time, but we may not have. But anyway, I asked the clerk to make a statement that this would happen, and she said she didn't remember. But anyway, that's just one example. But I've had situations where most recently in a trial, the only trial during the pandemic that was a court trial, because the judges allowed me a jury trial, because they used to have a domain web system here in Alameda County where there was a special number that you can make sure that your case is going to be heard. And so you'd use that line. I posted jury fees through that particular outlet. And when it came for the trial, the judge says, oh, you pay jury fees. So what happened, the judge tells me, oh, by the way, we stopped using that because it wasn't being used enough, that connection. But anyway, so no jury trial. During the trial, on cross-examination of the witness, the judge says to me, you can't cross-examine the witness. I said, well, this is cross-examination. What do you mean I can't cross-examine the witness? So yeah, it was upsetting. But and of course, I guess you asked, what did I do about it? Well, I talked to him, I knew it was going to happen. I reported it, so I didn't do anything else. But generally, I would be fighting it to the end. But I just didn't have the energy at this time.
And you make a really powerful point, and that is when Black lawyers, when we experience discrimination, we don't always feel empowered to say something. When I'm pulled over by a cop who doesn't believe I can afford the car I'm driving, my goal is to get out of that interaction alive, right? I know what my rights are, I know who I am and all of that, but I don't want to end up dead. I don't want to end up another statistic So you don't always feel empowered to speak out. When I've had clients tell me when they meet me for the first time, you don't sound Black on the phone. I had no idea you were Black. You don't really feel empowered to speak out then because you want to preserve that relationship. So this is where allies come in. I'm going to pass the mic to my good friend Amira to ask the next question.
Thank you. In a June 2021 article entitled "New Data Reveals the Startling Mental Health Struggles of Attorneys of Color," author Laura Bagby notes that 31% of Black lawyers have stated that they have contemplated suicide. This is a significant increase from approximately 23% of Hispanic and Latino attorneys, 20% Asian attorneys, and 19.4% white attorneys. Why are nearly 1/3 of Black lawyers contemplating suicide, and what can we do to save them? And I'll start off with Ms. Evans.
The suicide question, I don't think I'm really qualified to answer that question, but I do know that being a lawyer, especially coming from a firm background, is very, very stressful. Going back to the other question that we answered about just having to be better than just good. You know, they always say that as a Black person, you can't just be good, you have to be excellent, you have to excel over everyone else. Mediocre is not gonna cut it. Even if you're doing the best, you know, like you're performing like everyone else, you still have to be better than everybody else. Coming from a firm background, just with billable hours, trying to get clients, fighting other lawyers in your firm about clients. I mean, it could be somebody you met at an event, you signed the paperwork to, you know, this is your client, some older lawyer or something will come and, oh, I met that person 20 years ago. I want 30% credit, or I want half credit of that. It's just a constant battle. And just, you know, just the workload. I mean, billable hours alone, you may still have the, you know, the work to do it. So billable hours might not be a big issue for you, but just the stress of litigation in general. I think, you know, ex partes, you may think, oh, I have a light week or a light weekend, I don't have to work this weekend. And then somebody will say, oh, I'm going to go in ex parte or serve some motion that you have to deal with over the weekend and stuff. So I know I had a lot of stress working at a firm. I loved it. But then it just came to a point where it was just time to make a change just based on where I am in my life now. Being a mother of a young little girl and duties of a wife and things like that, that I just didn't want that lifestyle anymore. So I went in-house, and although still a lot of work to be done, it's a different stress. I definitely don't have the type of stress I had when I worked at the law firm with all the billable hour requirements and trying to get clients and maintaining your clients, and because all of that's gone now, and I couldn't be happier. And I think as far as what can we do to save people, you always hear that term, check in, or that phrase, check in with your strong friends. Because I know I'm a strong friend, and I know I internalize a lot of things. I might not complain. I may keep things in. I mean, I haven't contemplated suicide, but I will hold things in for a long time. I'm not really one to complain about things. And a lot of my friends are that way. So it's always good to check in with people, see how they're doing. I know we do that a lot with my friends. You know, how are things going? How's your week going? Check, you know, look at verbal cues and, you know, how people's facial expressions are looking. Or if you haven't heard from somebody in a long time, check in on them and see what's going on in their lives. And, you know, if you can help lighten the load sometimes, and that might mean babysit or, you know, bring dinner, send DoorDash over or something like that. But I think people are in general, whether you're at a firm or wherever, are just under a lot of stress, and the pandemic hasn't helped with that. So, you know, check in with your strong friends.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Evans. That's really important, to continue to check in on each other, no matter how we think a person is. Turn it over to Mr. Maloof.
Yes, thank you. You know, just being Black in this country is a heavy but awesome burden to carry. And the challenges we face as lawyers, specifically in the criminal justice system, are enormous. There is a lot of implicit biases that are running strong in all aspects of the legal field. And as Kimberly stated, we have to be 10 times better. But even when we are 10 times better than our counterparts, we're considered to be mediocre or average. Now, of course, I'm not an expert in the field of psychology, but that is a heavy burden. And that could be why 31% of Black lawyers have contemplated suicide, because just can you imagine being 10 times better, but then having to live with, yeah, all right, just mediocre? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Maloof.
Yes.
Now we'll turn to Mr. Holland.
It's a very difficult question to answer as to why people contemplate suicide. I've had several lawyer friends who did commit suicide. And I've thought about the stresses that they had in their lives, the stresses that many of us go through, and what can cause that. But I think a lot of times people don't realize, I've been in court where judges, you think you want to, and you probably say he's picking on that person. You know, they ask them questions, they don't like the answer, they ask another question to try to make them look confused and that they don't know what they're doing. And that happens quite often. So, and you have to be very careful to not allow judges to intimidate you, because all you got to do in many instances is just ask them, are they playing a race card? And everybody gets upset with you for saying that, but it's true. And a lot of times we don't want to say things in court because it may not be appropriate in our minds. But I have learned I don't take much stuff. I don't have to. What can you do to me? Yeah, you can refer me to the state bar, but then they got to answer the question. I thought it was racial, and they don't want to do much when they say that because it's the truth. But I'm saying that this job of being a lawyer is a tough job, and a lot of folks ought to really think about it before they take it on, because stress is unbelievable. I thought I was thick-skinned and you can get the best of me, but sometimes I get to think, well, wait a minute, But my way of dealing with things, like many people, you get angry and you want to retaliate, but you can't do it in court because they're always going to pull you in contempt or say things to you. But I remember, I remember lawyers like Clinton White. Clinton was probably one of the best lawyers in this state. And unfortunately, I don't mean this to be just a joke, but if you were charged with murder, you go get Clint White, because that's how good he was. But I'm saying that I remember he cursed the judge out, said something, a curse word about a judge, and they put him in a holding cell, and he had to get someone to get him out. But he was a person that I use as a mentor in that sense, because he's a very nice person, a very, very helpful person, one of the outstanding lawyers. But I'm telling you that suicide is something that I can't really answer the questions I said. So I'll just leave it alone. Thank you for allowing me to try.
Thank you, Mr. Holland. I really appreciate that.
Add something really quick.
Yes, Ms. Evans.
To that, to this question. Just this job can make you doubt yourself too. I had a situation when, and I'm sure this is probably the truth with lots of firms. So you have to prepare when you're wanting to be partner, prepare this book, this document, answering questions. They, research how many billable hours you had that year. If you had any clients, you're basically pumping yourself up in this article that you write or whatever. So I had done all that, submitted my paperwork. And there was this one partner who I used to work for, and we were cool. Like I was one of the people, like he'd walk around, hey, let's go grab a bagel or let's go to lunch. And then something shifted, and to this day, I don't know what it was, but he just turns his sights onto another attorney and basically wanted to disparage me for whatever reason. And I had turned in my paperwork for a partnership. They were going to announce, well, they're going to start researching and doing votes and stuff in the next week or so. He says, oh, I want to take you to lunch. And at the time, he was my team leader. Take me to lunch. I had no idea. And I'm thinking it was to help me with, to kind of talk to me about the partnership, things like that. And he proceeds to tell me all this stuff about, oh, well, you're a good lawyer, but I don't think you've even scratched the surface of what you can do. And here I have been practicing 10 years. I got excellent results. My clients loved me. And I mean, that took me down so many notches for a long time. Like I was so defeated, and to sit there, for one, not know why I'm going to this lunch, and then to not react. Because I had tears welling up, but I refused. I was like, you are not going to see me cry.
Right.
But I was defeated for a long time after that. And he basically told me in so many words, well, it's your decision, but basically that no partners were going to support me and that I should withdraw my application and try again the following year. I thought about it over the weekend, talked to my husband about it, and without talking to any other partners, I did that. I did withdraw my application. This other attorney who ended up being my mentor asked me several weeks later why I did that. And I told him what happened. And he said, he didn't discuss this with anybody. It's my understanding you had the support of the partnership. And I mean, it was really crazy. And I helped me get my confidence back. But even the following year when I resubmitted, I heard that he really talked bad about me in the meeting when they had to do the vote. And fortunately, I had support of, really big wigs in not just our office, but LA and New York. But, not everyone is gonna be, even if you work at the same company, a firm, whatever, they're not gonna have your back. They're not gonna have your best interests at heart. And so that's, thankfully, I have a strong network, friendships, family, and foundation that didn't just, although I was discouraged, he didn't break me. And I didn't just fall into despair and all that kind of stuff. It actually motivated me. But, some people that aren't that strong or don't have that support, that could really turn someone into like some kind of tailspin and just make them not be able to recover. So I just wanted to put that out there, that little story.
Ms. Evans, I really appreciate you sharing that story. I think we all can relate to that in any career. It goes even beyond being attorneys. I really appreciate that. I'll turn it over to Mr. Evans now for the next question.
And sure, and before we go to the next question, I also want to thank Kimberly for sharing that, because it was extremely powerful. And I just want to tell anybody who's out there watching, and I know we have a sizable audience, this is where the minority bars come in hand. If you need support, if there are no people of color at your firm, if there's nobody you can connect with, come to one of the minority bar associations and we'll provide that support that you're not getting at your firm. We'll provide that mentorship. And that's really what brought me to Charles Houston. I had leadership positions in different majority bar associations, but I didn't feel like folks really understood me, and I didn't feel like I could really express myself. And I was able to find that support and that love and that connection at Charles Houston and the other minority bar associations that are part of this program. So it leads us to our next question about the Supreme Court. It has been all over the news that President Biden has announced, and he's going to keep his campaign pledge to nominate a Black woman to the Supreme Court. It's interesting to note that we have had a U.S. Supreme Court for 232 years, and in 232 years, no Black woman, regardless of her qualifications, was ever considered seriously to be on the court. And now we have the opportunity to choose from several very highly qualified Black women, all of whom are more qualified than many of their predecessors. And so my question is, why do you think it's important for a Black woman to sit on the U.S. Supreme Court? And I am going to begin with Ms. Johnson.
Thank you. I guess first and foremost, because in 232 years, there's never been a Black woman. So period, full stop. the question that we were asked earlier about challenges and Black women, and certainly being in this profession, you know, I go back and think about certainly the Black women who have been the backbone of this country, carrying this country. Certainly the Black women who fought, I think you said the first Black woman to pass the bar in California, that happened in 1939. 1939? You know, when you think about history, when you think about this country, and when you think about things that Black people have been denied, education, housing, you know, employment, certainly, you know, higher education, voting. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. To not have that perspective sitting on the United States Supreme Court in the form of a Black woman is just, it's offensive, frankly. Having representation matters. It matters not just for women, it matters for men too. It matters for, no matter what your sexual orientation is, it matters, right? To see a Black woman sitting on the United States Supreme Court, the highest court in the land in this country, being able to offer her lens and her unique perspective. We are not a monolith, but certainly having, I think, of any of the candidates that have certainly been discussed in the news recently, I think we would be well served having any of those women. They are all exceptionally well qualified. They are all dynamic in their own right, and they also happen to be Black women. So it's so frustrating to hear the commentary about, well, you know, he's discriminating against others because he's singling out Black women, or why does it have to be a Black woman? Well, why isn't she the most qualified? Why isn't she well qualified to be appointed to that position? And so it really just is another way that it diminishes our value, diminishes our voice, it diminishes our worth and our contributions that I think we all certainly have. And it's about time. We're long overdue. And I look forward to seeing a Black woman sitting on the United States Supreme Court.
Amen. Bob Harris, I know you have some thoughts on this question.
Yeah, I have some real thoughts. It would give us an opportunity to have a Black person on the United States Supreme Court. And it's clear that we don't have that representation now. But more importantly, there are so many Black women historically that have been qualified to be on the bench on the Supreme Court. For example, Constance Baker Motley. I mean, here's a woman who really exemplified excellence, should have been appointed long time ago, but for white privilege, that is, preventing Blacks and others from being on the court, that would have happened. So I'm saying it is time, it is past time that we got rid of white privilege and allow Black women to take their rightful places on the United States Supreme Court. And I am just so pleased that we will have a person nominated and confirmed very soon who happens to be Black, and fortunately, a person who I believe will give us that Black representation on the Supreme Court that we so desperately need.
Yeah, and Bob, it kind of calls to mind the phrase, and I'm going to teach some folks in the audience who probably have never heard this: all skin folk ain't kinfolk. So just because somebody looks like this does not mean that they have the best interests of our community at heart. So
and Clarence Thomas is one of those people.
Clarence Thomas is one.
There you go. There you go.
And I ain't scared to say it.
Okay. I'll pass the mic to my good friend Amara. But just before we do, I know Eileen actually just wrote a letter to President Biden. Eileen, would you like to comment just very briefly on this issue? I know you just wrote the president on this.
Oh, yeah.
We did, and I have to admit that I was supported by my good colleague. I'm sorry, my brain after a certain time is thinking just about work. So
Judge
I
Harbin
apologize.
Forte.
Judge Harbin Forte and Ryan Harrison, and we wanted to recognize Justice Kruger as a potential candidate for the United States Supreme Court. We felt that she has been a spectacular jurist at the California Supreme Court level. She's led a life devoted to public service. She has worked at the United States Department of Justice. She goes on and on and on with all of the accolades that are in her career. And we felt that it was important also to have a Black woman from California, because we also believe that oftentimes the voice of California, or the voice of potentially the West Coast, is not necessarily heard, and that's a voice that needs to be heard as well. And so we are very familiar with Justice Kruger. We've read her opinions. We know who she is, and we felt like she would be a prime candidate. We hope that she's on the short list.
Thank you, Eileen. I'll pass the mic to Amira.
Thank you, Mr. Evans. Next question. All of you have had successful careers. There are a lot of young lawyers and law students watching this program. What advice do you have for the next generation of lawyers who aspire to be like you? I'm going to start with Ms. Schaller.
So what advice would I give you all? Go after your passion. Absolutely go after your passion. And I say that because there are so many opportunities to go after finances. There's so many opportunities to go after economic success. But at the end of the day, you have to be absolutely happy about what you are doing. And the only way that that's going to happen is by going after what you are truly passionate about, whether it is representing criminal defendants, whether it is representing our community in some other manner. This career choice is a very difficult one, as you've heard. And since we are doing something that is intellectually challenging, emotionally challenging, my advice to you would be that you should definitely go after something that is going to give you some pleasure every day, because you're going to be faced with so many other obstacles. So that would be my advice to young attorneys.
Thank you, Ms. Schaller, for that. I'll turn it back over to Mr. Evans.
Thank you so much. The next question focuses on a phrase, imposter syndrome. I'm sure folks have heard of it. Many minority lawyers, other lawyers too, but many minority lawyers in particular have grappled with imposter syndrome, which is defined as an internal experience of believing that you're not as competent as others perceive you to be. Kimberly, you talked about this a little bit when you were talking about the partnership issue that you dealt with. Can you talk a little bit more about imposter syndrome?
For me, it mostly had to do with the fact that, well, early on in my career, it wasn't really that I didn't think I was competent, but it was, I would doubt myself a lot. And a lot of it was because I dealt with a lot of trial by fire. So I remember I went to my first arbitration, and I didn't know what it was, didn't know what I was going to do. And the attorney, my partner, just said, just sit at the last chair at the end of the table and do what everybody else does. And so a lot of times, and I think at that time I sat at the chair that I thought was the end, and it ended up being the first chair. So I went first. But I just remember when I would get around more experienced lawyers, and it mostly was with cases. It didn't necessarily have to do with the lawyers in my firm, but it would be with cases with more experienced lawyers. I would just have this feeling of doubt sometimes. I remember specifically one of the first cases where I was lead counsel taking a deposition of a plaintiff. It was a multi-car accident. It was about 5 parties in the case. And so I was taking lead. And it's crazy because when I look back at it, no one was objecting. It's not like anyone was beating me up or anything when I was asking the questions. But I guess it's just because they looked bored. And then it's funny because as I got more experienced lawyer, I probably was looking bored in depositions too. But one was looking out the window, one was on their phone. And so I just felt like, did I ask all the right questions? Did I go into their medical history enough? And because I was the only Black attorney, sometimes you don't want to talk to a non-Black person, I'll just say a white person, about the doubts you have or feeling, not good enough or you're not doing a good job because you think that they're going to hold that against you. And at that time, my partner, who I mostly reported to, was out doing something else that day. And so my best friend, who also is a lawyer, she was a lawyer at another firm, I called her during a break because I was on the verge of tears. And I think I did cry on the phone because I just felt like I wasn't doing a good job and I didn't know what I was doing. And, she talked me off the ledge or whatever. And I went back and finished up the deposition. And then I told my partner, who came back the next day, kind of just how I felt. He's like, oh, I'm sure you did fine, whatever. But at first he did seem concerned, like, well, did you ask this? Did you ask that? Did you ask this? And then when the deposition transcript came in, he read it. He was like, you were tripping over nothing. You did great. I mean, and I think it was my first deposition. It was like my first or second deposition. So, that's just something that I had to deal with as a new lawyer. And I definitely overcame it the more experience I got as a lawyer. But, we're all competent. And, it's just, make sure you have someone, if it's not someone in your firm or your office where you are, find somebody else. For me, for a long time, it was someone who didn't even work at my firm. They worked at another firm. Later on, it became a very unlikely person. I mean, I was, in my, I think, late 30s, and my mentor ended up being a white man who was, I think, in his 60s. That was like my biggest ally at my firm. So, I mean, anyone that you feel that has your best interest at heart, that's someone you should be talking to on a regular basis to help you overcome those times when you feel that you're not competent or you're doubting yourself.
Thank you. And Rosenia, I know you also have some thoughts on this topic as well.
Yeah, I do have some thoughts. I'm going to circle back a little bit to Nedra, the question that you had presented to Nedra about what you can be to be like us. Everyone on here has done community service. So to me, above all is service. You're looking for people who are not just being successful in their legal practice or in their careers, they have dedicated their lives to the community and serving our community and making sure that we are at the highest level on all levels. So that is one thing that we definitely have in common, is that you as young lawyers or law students should look at being a service or a servant to your community first and not just to your career. Now back to the imposter syndrome. As we kind of had the pre-discussion, I told you I kind of never kind of had that syndrome. And I think it kind of goes back to, I was thinking about it today a little bit. I've always wanted to be a lawyer since I was 5 years old. My fantasy person was Perry Mason. That kind of ages me, but I knew I wanted to be a lawyer and nothing was going to stop me to be a lawyer. My parents always told me I was always available to be in any space that I wanted to be. That was confirmed in growing up in the Berkeley school system. They fortunately took out people who they believe had high potential, put us on a track to be successful. That was confirmed in college about going to law school and getting into law school. Now, law school may have derailed me a little bit because I did get off track in law school. That made me feel like, that first quarter grades came out and I'm like, okay, maybe I don't belong here. Maybe I did make a mistake. But then I had to realize I had to look into myself to see who I was and knew I needed to do something different and something better. It wasn't going to be as easy as undergrad or high school or whatever that it got me to getting out of law school. And so, but I do believe, and then when I finally did get a career, I didn't go in-house, which I think saved my mental health and my career. I don't believe I was built to be in a firm. So I went to literally in-house. I lucked out and got a job in-house where my law degree was valued. It was sought as something as a privilege and be valued to utilize at that company. So I was given opportunities just because I had a law degree to be more successful than I think I would have been in a firm. So honestly, I mean, kind of listening to Kimmy's stories, I don't know if I would have survived daily beatings or what, I'm not beatings, but like just criticism on a regular basis of my writing style, my presentation style, my ability to do whatever I needed to do on a regular basis. So thank God, whatever the career path I took or chose didn't put me in positions where I had to have criticism on a regular basis. Not saying you don't get criticism in the corporate world, but you do, but I don't think as bad as in a law firm. So I just never kind of had the imposter syndrome. I've always felt like I belonged in any space I was in.
We're going to move on to the next because the next two questions are so important and we're going to give everyone a chance to respond. And I'll warn people, we're going to run like 5 minutes over, not more than that. But I'm going to pass the mic to Amira so that we can get through just the last two questions. They're so important.
Thank you. As past Black Bar Association president, what advice do you have for current Black Bar Association leaders about how we can better serve the community? And I'm going to start this question off with Mr. Burris.
Question. I think that any leader of any association, particularly bar association, has to have a vision as to what they would like to accomplish during that period of time that they may be president. And that's something that should be thought about before they became president. Would they want to be more community service, want to be more in politics, they want to be about improving the lawyers in the association, whatever it happens to be. But you need to have a vision for it. And then you have to work with your staff, your board members and your other lawyers to help carry out that particular plan or vision that you have. So to me, it's a matter of cooperation. It's also having leadership skills to put forth a plan that you want to see come to fruition during the period of time that you're president. It can be done, but that's what you've got to have a plan for that and a vision and a willingness to work hard and do the little things that you may think that someone else is supposed to do and they don't do them. You then have to pick up the pieces and carry it forward because no one will ultimately make it happen better for you than yourself. So as a president, that's what you got to do, it seems to me.
Mr. Maloof, I know you have something to add to this.
Yeah, I sure do. You know, Denzel Washington, well, let me go back. Let me say this. We can't be afraid to fight the status quo. And we can't be afraid to hang out with people we don't know, make others feel that they want to be involved. We should go out on a limb and say hi to the young students, the new attorneys. When I was a young law student, I actually worked in John Burris's office and he made me feel wanted. He made me feel like, hey, you know, John Burris was as famous back then as he is now. And he knew my name. Wow. And so when you make people feel wanted, and look where I am today. So to the leaders of the Black Bar Associations, you know, don't hang out with the same crowd, break the, you know, fight the status quo, meet people that you don't know, especially the new lawyers and the new students. Thanks.
Thanks. To Mr. Harris.
As the former leader of 3 national organizations, I think it's important to remember what Charles Hamilton Houston said, when he said, a lawyer is either a social engineer or a parasite on society. So when you become a leader of a bar association or of any Association, you have to remember that you are leading because of a commitment and because that it is important to stay focused so that you can do the best job that you can do. Thank you.
Ms. Johnson?
Don't be afraid to, I would say, follow your vision. If you have new ideas, new ways of doing things, try them. I would say that that would be my best piece of advice. There are a lot of, I think, new leaders coming up, and tradition is certainly important and valued. But I also think a fresh perspective is also needed and necessary. So don't be afraid to speak up and have vision and see your vision through.
Ms. Schaller?
Mr. Harris said something very important, significant as it relates to the Charles Houston Bar Association, and that is that we are to be social engineers. And so I would just say that we need to keep a pulse on the issues that are impacting our community, not just our legal community, not just our legal profession, but those things that are impacting our community. We have to make sure that the movements of the day are more than just a movement. So we have to stay connected to those grassroots organizations that are making changes, that want to make systemic changes. And we have to be the voice for our community. That's the advice that I would give you. That's what I would say that we should be doing as bar associations. Make sure that our lives are not neglected nor ignored, but make sure that our voices are heard and we are more than just a movement.
Thank you, Ms. Schaller. Mr. Holland?
I think we have to keep in mind public service. I am president of the the Oakland branch of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, the NAACP. I've had a wonderful legal career, but a concern I've always had was, how did I get where I am? People died for my right to vote. People died for me to go to school. People died for me to eat at lunch counters with other folks. I'm saying that some of us have forgotten about that. You got to give back to the community. You have that legal training, and we have a population that's thirsty to have legal representation. But things have changed significantly since I first started practicing, because most of us, or many of us at that time, not most, many of us at that time recognized public service, and they contributed. We have a difficult time now getting people to volunteer to do things for other folks. And it's just unbelievable the kinds of problems that I have to deal with in our community. I mean, from schools to prisons to stores to jobs, everything imaginable. And we need more lawyers who can take some extra time and give back to the community, because you owe them. And if you forget that need that we have, and you don't want to be involved in public service, something's wrong with you. Yeah, you are a parasite. Thank you.
Ms. Cummings?
Just to iterate what everyone else said, definitely community service above all. And I believe someone had mentioned follow your passion. I believe a law degree is an avenue to any type of job you want. I didn't take a normal career path. Don't look at, because I went to law school, I passed the bar, I must be a lawyer, I must work at a firm, I must work at a corporation. That law degree can break glass ceilings, put you in places that you have never imagined. So take your imagination, take your bar exam, take that degree and figure out what you want to do in life, and look at your passion while you do your community service.
Thank you, Ms. Cummings. And we'll end with Ms. Evans.
Everyone has already said, but spend some time really understanding the mission of the organization and make sure your vision aligns with that.
Thank you, Ms. Evans. And now to you, Mr. Evans.
Thank you so much. So this brings us to our last question, and we're about to wrap up. I do apologize for running a couple minutes over, But it brings us full circle. As we began the program, I showed you those critical race theory maps where we have continued to see an expansion of bans on having the very conversation that we had tonight in public schools and public universities and in public places of work. And so my final question, and we don't need necessarily everybody to answer, is why are programs like what we had tonight important? Why should we be talking about Black history and the history of Asian people and Latinx, Hispanic people, Native American people, LGBTQ people, people of color and their contributions? Does anybody want to have some words on why these conversations are important?
I would. Black history is American history. Not to teach it should be a crime.
Well said. Any other final thoughts before we wrap up this evening?
I go along with John Burris. I thought I knew my history and I thought I knew California history, and I learned a lot tonight. So I'm going to be reading the handout a little bit better. You can't repeat our history enough for us to learn it and understand it. And you learn something more and more every day, how important your people are. So you will never have the imposter syndrome no matter where you go in the world.
I think it's very, very important to remember your history, because we have come a long, long way. A lot of our folks don't want to talk about slavery and discrimination and segregation, those kind of things. But you have to remember what happened. It's something that you always should keep in mind. The Jewish folks remember the Holocaust, and they want you to remember too. So I'm telling you, history can get lost. We can forget how it used to be and how it was. But if you don't talk about it and keep it up in front of your mind, then you'll start forgetting about it and think it never happened. And we can't allow that. We cannot allow that. So please remember your history.
Amen. Well, thank you everybody for being part of this program. Again, for those who are seeking MCLE credit, we'll be in touch with all of those who responded to the polling questions to help you get that credit. Please look at the written materials, which will be emailed to everyone that provides additional Black history information that we didn't get to. Eileen, I saw your hand up.
Just real quick as well, I gave everyone the information about the California Association of Black Lawyers, and we are wanting members to step forward and help. We've got a legislative day coming up where we're going to actually meet with our senators and assembly members in Sacramento. And we would love to have you there to understand what legislation we're tackling. And also our cable conference. We are going to have MCLEs. We would love assistance in putting those together, several events, a judges luncheon, a gala. So if you are at all interested in learning more about cable and knowing the presidents that are here, all of them had cable conferences and similar legislative days. This is a phenomenal time, and your participation in our organizations make the organization successful.
Amen. Well said. So thanks again, everybody, for being part of this event. Feel free to join any of the minority bar associations where you have a home. We're here to love you and support you and keep you strong. And thanks again to our amazing all-star panel. Love all of you. I appreciate you for being part of this. I am going to copy all the questions from the chat so that we can make sure that we keep in touch with everybody. This program was recorded and will be available. Keep watch on your email because we have some other great programs that we'll keep you informed with. Have a great night, everybody.
Thank you.